right, we still got like 10 minutes, so it's all good. We'll do some pre-show banter here. So while we'll do a proper intro because and all that in a bit. But thank you all for coming. It's a 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
I lost track.
6:30.
It's 6:30 now. All right, so all right, so good. Oh my goodness. So everybody is here to learn about monsters and ghosts of Florida, right? Okay, I was saying because what you say to a naked cosplayers on floor 3. So I hate to disappoint. So, all right. But
Is that really a thing?
That was actually a thing in the panel rooms. I was like, for the 18+ track. So not to be confused with the X track, and I know since that's an easy confusion.
18+.
Yeah, I think you have to know the right people to get it. I think it's part of an extension of the Bunny Hutch thing. So yeah.
Oh Lord.
Man, talk about cryptids. The Bunny Hutch last night was exciting. So I was like, wow, that was nice. Oh man. So all right. So how many people here are from Florida? All right. How many people are actual native Floridian? Oh wow, that's a lot more than I expect. Because usually that's a lot less. So. Hey, the Dark Lord himself, thank you. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. You know your panel's hot when the hot ones come, so it's good. So, oh my goodness. Okay, so we got a lot of Floridians. Do you live there now?
Yeah.
How many of you escaped? Okay, a few have escaped from Florida. Yes.
Haven't escaped from the South yet.
No, if you're still here, it's.
Working on
We've got our, at least here you only have 6 months of August. For Florida, we have 9 months of August. Oh, hey, how are you, stranger? Oh my gosh, good to see you. And we get our 3 random days of winter, here and there. So we can talk about the real scary stuff in Florida. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, some places like Tennessee, you get a couple hours of winter and then back to normal. Yeah, so. But oh my goodness. Yeah, we get all kinds of fun. So. Wow, we filled up fast. This is crazy. So, goodness. I know that I was like, oh, is this the line? I saw this little short line, and they're like, oh no, it goes on down. I'm like, oh, okay. I won't bother anybody. So how many people had to wait on the bottom floor? A few? Okay, I'm sorry. We've been walking up and down these hills. I'm with the Bard's Tower and the vendor hall is where they've got me selling books. So that's a long haul. So for a guy who's used to Florida, where everything is flat, and now I have hills again. But my new book is Eerie, Appalachia, so I've been doing a lot of mountains and stuff. So I was at least a little prepared, but I was not prepared for the Atlanta traffic. So I had forgotten that. I forgot my Atlanta is a lot like Miami, where it's 1 hour. Miami is 1 hour from Miami.
Yep.
And Orlando is 3 hours from Orlando when the parks let out. So that's always fun too. Oh my goodness. So too much fun, gang. So all right. So we're getting close. I think we still got a few more minutes. So we'll just keep it kind of fun and chatty for a bit. So
I don't get why they don't build from probably the Millennia area down to past.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's been money for trams, and monorails. Somehow it mysteriously vanishes and they can never run it. So it's how these things work.
But the parks keep expanding.
It's all a matter of which theme park's going to pay you the most money to run it. So that'll be where the money is. All right. Anybody who has an empty seat next to them, raise your hand so people can find seats that are standing in the back. So everybody's got to have new friends. So come on down, have seats, gang. So the fire marshal will yell at us if we have too many people standing. So.
Open chairs down here.
I don't know. Is it? Hello? Oh, just all right. Oh, that's better. Is that better? Or is that worse?
Yes. No, that's better.
Okay. I'm used to standing and walking around, so this is actually kind of nice at the end of the day. All right, so I'm good. Just let me get a little more play in the court. There we go. Oh yeah. Look at that. All right, look at all these friends. We're all new friends now. We're all here for monsters, ghosts, dark history, creepy stuff, right? All right, so we're good. You need the mic?
No.
Okay. You're a pro. So good. All right, let's go ahead and do it.
Yep. All right. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in. This is going to be Mark Muncy with Florida Paranormal. My name is Erin. I'm one of the volunteers for the X Track and Paranormal Track. I am also one of the co-founders of Georgia Paranormal Investigations. So I just wanted to let you know and remind you that masks are required inside, so unless you're actively eating or drinking, please keep it on. No flash photography. It could be a little distracting and it'll scare the ghosts. Everybody knows of the DragonCon charity, yes? Yeah. Does anybody not know about the DragonCon charity? Awesome. So we have some limited edition X Track and Paranormal Track ribbons that we are asking for a $2 donation. So we'll have those up here or at the door when you guys are done. Just grab some cash. Any donation is always thankful, but or we're grateful for that. But for a $2, we can get you a ribbon, or of course more. If you want to get more. Oh, rate your panels. Does everybody have the DragonCon app on their phones? Yeah. Awesome. Be sure to rate your panels. This one, all of them that you go to, DragonCon actually reads those, so it helps. You good? Okay. DragonCon actually reads those, so rate your panels. If there's things you want to see more of, if there's things you want to see less of, let them know, okay? So thank you again for coming, and I'll leave it for you.
All right.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
Awesome. So without much further ado, let's see. So I am Mark Muncy. I am the author of the Eerie, Florida book series. My lovely wife, Carrie Schultz, hiding over there in the corner, is the illustrator. So all those wonderful cryptid illustrations. She's the one who brings them to life because those monsters don't like to pose for anything but blurry photos. They're all such divas. Yeah. Anyway, so what I started as was a haunted house guy. I built a haunted attraction in St. Petersburg, Florida, because I couldn't afford to take my kids to Halloween Horror Nights, which was still Fright Nights back then. And so I built my own. And I had always had a love of monsters and legends because I'd grown up in the back hills of Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia. Yay! So, and so I knew about the Mothman, and I knew about the Grafton Monster and the Flatwoods Monster. And then as I moved to Florida, I came because my father was a vice president of Greyhound. And hey, bus people, yay, great. Go Greyhound and leave the driving to us. But anyway, 1980, Tampa Bay had a tragedy, and it was the Skyway Bridge that went over Tampa Bay to Sarasota, and 11-mile bridge, and it goes over the mouth of Tampa Bay, and the USS Summit Venture, a giant oil tanker, was coming into Tampa Bay. And there was one of those freak afternoon tropical storms we get, but this was in the morning. It lasted about 30 minutes, but it was enough to send the Summit Venture off course, and it hit the bridge, and the bridge collapsed. And 23 lives were lost on that bridge, most of them in a Greyhound bus that went off the top of that bridge 200 feet into the waters of Tampa Bay. And the St. Petersburg Museum of History has the actual recordings of the Mayday calls and the 911 calls and stuff, so it's creepy stuff. There were survivors. Some people landed on the boat, the big Summit Venture, and it's crazy. So my father was called there because it was the worst bus disaster in history. So he came down here, fell in love with the place, and said, "We're moving to Florida," like everybody does. And so we did 2 years later. So I transferred that love of monsters and legends down here. And as a teenager, I ate up everything we could, monsters, myths, and legends and all that back in the early 80s. So we were at the boom of it, in search of reruns, Time Life mysteries, all that fun stuff we'd all spend money on that we didn't have. But eventually, like I said, I decided I wanted to run a haunted house. And we based it all on local lore and legends. And one of the legends that I knew of was about that bus. That people kept seeing the bus and hearing the bus over and over and over. And I thought that was kind of an interesting story because I had kind of a tie to it. So I would go, and what they did was they built the new Skyway Bridge, but the old bridge, they left part of it on each side as a fishing pier. It goes way out into the bay. It's amazing. And it's still there, and you can go out and fish on it. And fishermen in the mornings will sometimes see a bus come charging up this is a walking pier. There's not many cars on it, and a bus comes by and it'll drive off the edge and splash into the water. They'll hear the splash later. Now I have several friends who are Seminole tribe, and they do a lot of the wire work and electric work that's all over the Skyway Bridge. And they just rewired it with fiber optic lights so it lights up night and it's pretty colors. And while they were out there, one of them called me and said, "Muncy, you're not going to believe this." I'm like, what is it, Dave? He's like, "I heard it." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I heard the splash." He's like, "What?" I heard the room, and then we heard the giant splash, and it was the bus. And I was like, "Oh, well, I told you it's there." So I was like, "Read my book." And he's like, "Yeah, I just wanted you to know it's real." I said, with enough witnesses, something's going on. He's like, "But we still haven't seen old Hitler." So does anybody know who old Hitler is? Okay, first thing you're going to learn, Florida loves to rename everything. We can't have nice things. Okay? We have our, we have the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, all that wonderful, Yowie and all that. No, Florida is a skunk ape. There's one in the town of Barden that is one of my favorite monsters. He's got a lantern, so you see his light. He's like the lazy skunk ape. It's great. You see his light, and he kind of comes out. He's panting because it's so hot, and then sometimes he's seen with a fishing rod, and he's out by a lake and stuff. So is he the beast of Barden? No. Florida calls him the Barden Booger. Yeah, you gotta love that, right? It was a great hit song in the 60s near Jacksonville called the Barden Booger Boogie, and you can look it up. So, but anyway, so these monsters and these legends are everywhere, and we love these things. So old Hitler is the Tampa Bay great white shark. He is 17 feet long. He is a great white hammerhead, and he eats all kinds of things. There are stories of him dragging a Jeep into Tampa Bay off of that same fishing pier where its tow hook was out as it was towing in a boat, and the shark grabbed it and took the Jeep out to the water. It's scarred all over it from all these fisherman hooks and harpoons and stuff. So of course it has on its forehead, one of the scars is shaped like a swastika. So he's not the beast of Tampa Bay, the great white shark. No, he's old Hitler. But the truth is, that's one we had to debunk, sadly. Old Hitler is kind of real, but kind of not. Because what you do is you start looking into these stories, and you find the history behind them. And what old Hitler was 1940s, World War II, Tampa Bay was convinced they were the next target after Pearl Harbor, because they were the next big shipping liner. They were either going to hit Tampa, or they were going to hit New Orleans. And so they patrolled the heck out of these waters, the Gulf. There were Nazi subs in the Gulf of Mexico, and people don't believe that, but they got here. They sank a couple boats. It was kept as much out of the press as possible. One sub let spies off near Pensacola. And they were all, and some let people off the coast. There was one that got into South Carolina, on an island in South Carolina, and these spies tried to infiltrate Washington, D.C. and blow up targets, and they were all going to travel up through the different states, and the ones that landed in Pensacola got caught and turned everybody else in, otherwise we might have had some problems. But they kept that quiet. That was classified information until just about 20 years ago. So this is stuff people don't learn in their history books. But back to old Hitler. Sorry, I'll digress a little bit here and there. They put up spotter balloons to look for subs. And these guys would be up in these little balloons hanging up over the bay, and they're just looking out there, and there's a dark shape, a big dark shape. It's a sub! It's a sub! They go, nope, it's a hammerhead shark. Okay, so the code name for that became Old Hitler. So it's another Old Hitler. It's another Old Hitler. So what happened is the fishermen, every shark suddenly became a single shark, Old Hitler. And that's where the legend comes from. So you can go out there today and ask anybody, hey, you seen Old Hitler lately? They'll be like, oh, he was out by the bait shop, or whatever. So I was like, okay. So, so that's where the monsters sometimes are not quite so monstrous. So, all right. So since we're now getting started, and I feel like we all know each other a little bit, how many people have actually read one of my books? Anybody? Oh, a couple. Okay. How many people have just seen them in Cracker Barrel or Walgreens and go, what the hell is that? Yeah. I have some people who love pointing out that they're in Harbor Freight. So, got the Harbor Freight cryptid market cornered, baby. And then some of you might have seen me on my 38 seconds on Ancient Aliens, and my 3.5 minutes on Expedition Unknown. So, that's where you're like, I know that guy. So, done some other shows, but those are the big ones. I do a lot of documentaries and stuff. They always have me popping up. For those who have Travel Channel or Discovery Plus, September 30th, there's a new shock doc called The Curse of Robert the Doll. And I am one of the talking heads and narrator. So if you want to watch something spooky, so I'm going to give you a little preview of that. How many people here know Robert the Doll? He's pretty famous. He's Florida's most famous resident, or most infamous resident, shall we? So for those of you who don't know, I'm going to take you on a little trip. And those of you who do, I'm going to give you a little new insight into Robert. So Robert lives down in Key West, so all the way down in fun Key West, the Conch Republic. Key West is a small town with a beach feel, and it is probably the wackiest town in Florida, and that is saying a lot. Most famously, the town's mayor at one point was a guy named Captain Tony. Captain Tony was a fisherman who was a drug smuggler, who worked his way up to chief of the fire department as he was still smuggling drugs from the fire department. Then he got elected mayor, and then the DEA comes and invades the fire department, and they said, did you know your fire department was dealing drugs? Captain Tony immediately goes, I am shocked to hear these news. A few years later, Florida, they're because of the Cuban boat crisis, they actually make a borderline at the edge of the Keys, and Captain Tony was the mayor of Key West, and they demand, they live because of tourism, and suddenly people couldn't get there. So they immediately seceded from the Union and declared war on the United States. 4 minutes later, they surrendered and demanded $8 billion in foreign aid. And a couple years later, they decide to do a Navy a field exercise where they're going to treat Key West as a foreign nation, and we're going to try to do negotiations for supplies. Well, Captain Tony found out about this and immediately rebuilt the Conch Republic, armed all the militia, which he gave them all Cuban bread, and then had all the boats go out with fire hoses and spray the Navy to repel the invaders. And the Navy surrendered to Key West. So they have these great shirts, Key West, we seceded where others failed. Right? You gotta love that, right? So anyway, that's the mindset of this town, okay? But we're gonna go a little before Captain Tony's time. We are gonna go back, so early 1900s, Key West is one of the most prosperous cities in America because it's all the trade is coming in and everything. And there's a family there, the Ottos,
And they have this beautiful house, the Otto House, and it's right downtown Key West. And they are in love with their youngest boy, Robert. And Robert is just spoiled rotten. And his dad goes to Germany and buys this amazing Steiff doll. Now the Steiff company is the company that made teddy bears and all that famous. And he brings it back and he gives it to his son, Robert. And Robert is the happiest kid in the world. The doll is the same size as him, looks, is just perfect. It's like the My Little Buddy of his day, right? And he's so happy, and he takes it everywhere, and they're showing it off everywhere. Well, suddenly weird things start happening. Bad things start happening. Things start breaking. Toys start going missing. Silverware, dishes, and the servants are upset. They don't want anything to do with this. And then one of them says, "Hey, the kid's talking to the doll, and the doll is talking back in a different voice, and I'm creeped out, and I'm getting out of here." Well, Key West, small town. They start running out of servants. They're not going to have any more servants, so none of them are going to want to work here. So they go, "Robert, you got to stop messing around, whatever you're doing." And he goes, "I didn't do it. Robert did it." And they're like, "You're Robert." Right? And he's like, "No, I'm going to go by my middle name, Gene, because the doll wants to use the name Robert, and we don't want any more confusion. I'm giving him my name." Nowadays, we'd have given that kid some Ritalin and we wouldn't have a story. But of course we have a story, right? So they go on. The family eventually gets sick and tired of all these antics and locks the doll up in the turret room, the attic. Poor little Gene is so upset because his doll is not allowed to play with it. But eventually, Gene grows up, moves to Paris, and tries to become an artist. His family's wealthy. And he finds the love of his life in New York when he comes back. And she's this amazing singer in New York. And they are a prosperous couple. But then he finds out his father has died and his mother is ill. He needs to return to Key West. He moves back to Key West. He goes back into the Otto house and he introduces his mom. And then he goes upstairs to the attic and there's Robert. And he's so happy to have his old friend back. And so he introduces his wife to this creepy doll. And this is my best friend. This is who I've been telling you about all these years. Right? Red flags. Florida man. All right. Anyway, sorry, Robert. I forgot a rule. Oh, I didn't do that. All right, we didn't plan this. But, okay, so before we talk any more about Robert, Robert has rules. And I broke one just now. So, when you talk about Robert, you have to be very polite to Robert. When you talk to Robert, you have to be polite to Robert. You have to follow rules, because Robert likes that. Robert, we love you, okay? We're all very fans. I'm telling your story here, okay? All right, so, anyway, back to his story. So, Gene and Robert become the talk of the town of Key West. They are now reunited. They're going everywhere to these restaurants. They're going to all these shows and art premieres. And his mom passes away, and so he's decided he's going to turn the house into an artist commune as well as being his home. So he's going to make it the artist's house because he's going to show off his art. And he's become super popular, and he's doing all this. And when they go to the restaurants, there's a separate place for Robert at the dining place. There's a separate, and the wife isn't allowed in for 5 minutes till they've made their grand entrance. She is really the sad victim of Robert that we don't talk about because she didn't get treated very nicely. And Robert got all the attention. Her singing career had been left up in New York and was no longer a thing down in Key West. But Gene and Robert didn't last long because Gene passed away. He never did finish his art commune. And then his wife had inherited the doll in the creepy house, and she quickly sold the house after locking the doll back in the turret room again. New people bought the house. They found the doll. They were happy because they'd heard all these stories about this doll. They started showing him off, and it didn't take long for them to lock him back into the attic. So years go on. People see the doll off and on out the windows. And finally, one lady is just done. She's like, I'm done. She takes it to the Fort East Morello Museum and says, "This is Robert the Doll, take it. It's haunted, it's terrible." And they're like, "What?" But this was kind of an eclectic museum, it's old Civil War fort, so they're like, "Sure, why not?" And they kept him in back, they didn't know what to do with him. But word got out that Robert was there, so people would come and arrange times to see him and things to meet him, because they'd heard all these stories. And then Robert was really demanding to be seen. He started messing with the staff. He started, most famously, a plumber came in to fix some pipes at the museum, and suddenly Robert was standing right behind him, and he refused to work there ever again, and he told every plumber in Key West, never go to that fort. And so they had to get a plumber from Miami. Like I said, small town, easy to do, right? So then they realized Robert wants to be seen, so they put him on display, and that's when they started realizing Robert has these rules. So as I said, the first rule, be polite. Ask, introduce yourself. Do the follow the customs. Introduce yourself. "Hi, Robert. How are you?" Rule 2: never take his photo without permission. And you always say, "Robert, is it okay if I take your photo? Robert, is it okay if we film you for this documentary? Robert, is it okay if I make a little YouTube selfie in front of you? I promise not to make fun of you." Rule 3: say goodbye to Robert. That's the one a lot of people miss, because you got to break that connection. If you don't, he can stay with you. Lastly, if you screwed up 1 through 3, you write him a letter of apology. Okay? You say, "Robert, I'm sorry, I screwed up," which I may have to after this. And if you don't believe this, like this sounds, it's a doll, right? How can it be? Go to Key West. Go to the museum. They get 100 letters a month or more. People apologizing. Car wrecks, plane crashes, lost luggage, every little thing. My favorite letter of all time is, "Dear Sir Robert," sir, right? "I'm sorry I made fun of your leather face and called it stupid. Leather is actually very nice for a face, and you are quite handsome. Please forgive us and remove the curse. We get the message. Please fix my eye, my Xbox, and my marriage." Wow. I love that he put it in that order, right? Florida man! Yay! But anyway, the 3 former presidents have written Robert. A couple of them just wishing him a happy 100th birthday and a happy 110th birthday. There's a lot more. And for that documentary that's coming out, now that it's been announced, I can announce a couple things from the NDA from that. It was the first time we took Robert out of the museum and back to the artist's house, up to the turret room for the first time in 30 years. That we got to take him up to the turret, which is now an Airbnb. And you can go stay there in the artist's house. You can stay in Robert's room. You can stay downstairs in Jean's room. And the question is, was the house haunted before Robert? Because there's lots of ghosts still seen in that house. So paranormal teams line up to get rooms at the artist's house. But anyway, so we set the bar there, right? Okay? So we've done Old Hitler. We've done Barton Booger, we mentioned in passing. All right, so do we want ghost or cryptid? Somebody, let's go. All right, hands up for ghost. Okay, hands up for cryptid. Okay, 50-50, great. Thank you, Florida. Who all's from Escambia? All right, there's who threw the vote. There we go. All right, so that's all right. So we'll do one of each. All right, I'll do one of each. We'll start with ghosts. Okay, right? Because everybody loves a good ghost story. Okay, so I've done a lot here now. We've talked Key West, and of course everybody knows St. Augustine is it's a cottage industry for ghosts in St. Augustine. It's the oldest inhabited settlement in the U.S. for Eastern Europeans. It may be, because we think New Smyrna actually might predate it a little bit. But now that history is dug a little bit further, but St. Augustine will not let them take that title without a fight. I do expect bloodshed at some point, but because Florida. But so St. Augustine, tons of ghost stories, and so everybody knows this. I'm going to take you a little further north. You go right up on the Florida-Georgia border, Fernandina Beach. Okay, anybody love this place? All right. All right, hey, yeah, Amelia Island is called, and this is one of the most interesting geological things in Florida. It's completely surrounded by deep water, so this was a great place for boating. This is where the Spanish set up their first, well, the French set up their first fort there, and it was Fort Marion, and then it got destroyed by the Spanish. No one really knows exactly where Fort Marion is because they burned it to the ground and slaughtered everyone who was there. They did that because all the sailors had sailed south to attack St. Augustine, got stuck in a storm, and they were all met by the St. Augustine patrol crawling out of their boats, and St. Augustine guys said, all right, you got two choices. You know, join the Catholic Church or we're going to cut your heads off. And they cut thousands of heads off. You know, that's the different times. So the bay that they did that in used to be called Porpoise Bay or Dolphin Bay. It's now Matanzas, which means massacre. So that's, you know, I like Dolphin Bay, but Massacre Bay is cool. You know? So, anyway, but back to Amelia Island. So what was cool about it was, you know, the Spanish held it for a long time. And one of the greatest named Scotsmen of all time, and probably one of the worst con artists of all time, is a man named Gregor MacGregor. Right? How's that? How cool of a name is that, right? All right, so he was a Scottish nobleman who decided he was going to colonize the New World, sailed over here and sailed to Mexico, and went to a deep jungle and made his own country in the jungle. And he made his own currency, and he sent back pictures to his families in Scotland and said, come settle here, it's amazing, you can grow anything, and it's, look how beautiful it is, and I've got my own money and all this. And so lots of people came and settled in that land. It was jungle, and he hadn't claimed anything. They all died. And he sailed away going, I'll be back with help. And no, they all died. But he organized, because of this though, he bluffed his way into a knightdom from Mexico. And then he's like, well, I'm going to claim an island for Mexico. So he's going to claim it back from Spain. He claims Amelia Island. And it's going to be for the Free Republic of Mexico. And then he decides, no, Florida. It'll be the Free Republic of Florida. And he's sailing with 10,000 men. He had 12 guys in a boat. But he sent a letter to the Spanish. They had 10,000 men coming to take that from his fake country. So the Spanish left. They were terrified of Gregor MacGregor's mercenaries. And he sails into port, takes over the town, and makes it a pirate haven. Blackbeard sails up. This is a cool place to party. I'm going to hang out. All these famous pirates you hear about, they're all there at some point, hanging out, having a grand time. And it is, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean? Nope, Amelia Island. Anyway, while they're there, MacGregor has his buddy, a guy named Luke Ory, who's a French pirate. And Luke's there, and he's got his son, Louis Ory, and they're running the town. They're running it like the mafia. We get 10% of everything. 10% of the bordello, 10% of this, 10% of that. It's just the way the world works. And it's a deep water port, so all these boats are coming in. They're getting 10% of every little thing that travels through. And eventually, Gregor MacGregor realizes the Spanishes are coming back because he didn't have 10,000 men, and they know it's just a bunch of pirates. We can take them. So the Spanish Armada is coming back. So he's like, I've been called back to me homeland in Scotland. Oh my God. Bye, and flees. And Luke Ory goes, I'm going to go with you. I think that's a good idea. But his son, Louis, says, you know what, Dad, I got a good thing going here. I'm getting 10% of everything. I'll be the aide de camp to the Spanish when they get back. I'll help them, and I'll just be nice. They'll be cool, and I'll help them see how things work around here. Well, the Spanish arrive, and Louis like, all right, I'm the head guy here. I'm gonna help you guys out. Within a day, he's arrested, and he's put in the old jail, and they're gonna hang him in the morning. And Louis like, I'm being hung for my dad's problems, not mine. But they're not gonna have the satisfaction. So he takes a knife that he smuggled into jail and slices his own throat. They get to him and they go, wait a minute, we can't lose our hanging in the morning. Let's save him. So they stitched his neck back up and saved his life. To hang him in the following morning. Florida! So, anyway, yeah. So this Florida man now is marched to the scaffold. Imagine that, he didn't have any last words. His clothing is, buttoned up, everything. And how many of you are Harry Potter fans? You want to know what Louis kind of inspired? There's Nearly Headless Nick. Pop Goes the Weasel comes to mind. Yep, he's splattered. Yeah, if you were a Gallagher fan, you were in the first 3 seats, you're in the splash zone. So, blood everywhere. Terrible thing. But his ghost is seen in the old jail, dangling Nearly Headless Nick style. And there's a blood stain at his cell that no matter how many times they wash and how many times they get rid of it, it comes back on random occasions. So the people who run the museum, it's now a historical society headquarters, and they will tell you they freak out a lot because suddenly there's this guy, that's kind of standing there going, hey, how's it going? But anyway, that's probably one of the coolest ghosts around. But we've got so many ghosts. The most haunted building in Florida. Anybody take a guess? Any ideas? Disney World's pretty good. My favorite is there's a ghost with the eyesore. Yes. The Biltmore is really good down in Coral Gables. That one has Fatty Walsh, who was a gangster who was murdered there on the 13th floor. Now he's probably pretty famous because he's been documented by the Secret Service. A president was watching a football game there on the 13th floor, and he got disturbed by a man in a pinstripe suit, and he thought it was some cosplayer or costume party or something. So he called the Secret Service in, and then he had to get moved to another floor because they couldn't find the guy. And it's Fatty Walsh. It was the gangster who was murdered there. So that was pretty good too. But the most haunted building in Florida, most paranormal experts agree, is the Cuban Club in Ybor City. Yes. The mob ran that for years. The police were not allowed to investigate any crime in Ybor City because they ran it so well that the mayor and the chief of police had to ask permission if they wanted to investigate a crime in Ybor City. So pretty crazy, right? But anyway, we know of at least 6 deaths there because we don't know how many died there that weren't reported. But we had an actor who was on the theater stage there. He was a playwright, and he couldn't remember the words to his own line, to his own plays. He was so embarrassed he killed himself on stage in front of witnesses. So that one had to be reported. And he's still seen in the bathroom there crying in the mirror. And then he'll walk through the mirror and talk to you. So there was a little kid who died in the basement there. They called it a pool, but it's more like what we would think of as a hot tub. And a little kid named Jaime drowned there. And then most famously, a bride up on the 4th floor, the big ballroom, right after her wedding, stumbled down the stairs and died. She had a dawn wedding, and it was beautiful and cascaded down. So these ghosts are seen tons, but that's the ones we know of. We know there are at least a dozen more murders and other things that happened. A man was pushed off the top floor, another man was pushed off of the lower floor balcony. It's tons of stuff, but it's a crazy building. So there are tons of places like that in Florida, throughout Florida. And of course, all the native burial sites underneath, and throughout it all. And they're everywhere. So let's go to a monster. and a native monster. So, Florida. How many people like Nessie? All right. How many people like Champ? Lake Monsters. We got Lake Monster fans. Okay. So, Florida has one. It's in the St. Johns River. It's been seen by the native tribes. So the St. Johns River goes up from South Georgia all the way through down to Sanford, like just north of or just west of Orlando, and empties out into the Atlantic. And it's it's just this amazing little place. This river is huge and in places bigger than some lakes, and the creature that is seen there. Like I said, it goes back to the natives. They just called it the beast, or the great swamp creature, and they just knew to stay away from it, or offer it fish before you go trolling through the St. Johns, because it likes to eat fish. Imagine that. It's a sea monster. But other times they would offer up pigs, because the Spanish kept bringing all these pigs in, so they were, hey, let's use these. I mean, it's not our monster. Let's use that. But anyway, in the 1800s, this thing was seen, and it almost sank a steamship. Made the news. This thing was so big, 40 feet long. Had a giant gray hump back, but the rest of it was the color of boiled shrimp. So as we know, Florida loves to rename things.
Oh, God.
So this is not the Beast of St. John's. This is not the river monster. This is not the great beast, the swamp beast. No, we call him Pinky. Yes. Pinky the sea monster. Pinky was seen all the way up until the early 1980s. And this is why we talk about Pinky, is because his carcass was seen in 1987, washed up on the shores of Lake Majority, a giant pink unknown blob shape that some say, oh, it was a giant squid. Some say, oh, it was an albino manatee. 30 feet long albino manatee, right? Yeah. But when the science team from Jacksonville got there to investigate, it was missing. Something had dragged it back into the water. Something bigger. So maybe Pinky has a friend, or something likes to eat pinkies. We don't know. So Florida has its own ecological system here. So we've got skunk apes, and we've got to talk about skunk apes a little bit, because they're Bigfoot, right? But there are different stages of them. There are different styles of them down here, because we're meaner in Florida. We want to kill you. That's what Florida's all about, right? If you go down the ones towards the Everglades, right? I always like to explain Florida from above, right? You look at it from above at night from space, because we're the Space Coast. It's always good. They always take pictures of it. And you see the lights, right? So the bright lights all along the beaches. There's not a dark beach anywhere, right? Because that's where all the tourists are. Then you get the big bright lights next to them. That's all the beach towns. That's the Jacksonville's, the Tampas, the Miamis, and Fort Lauderdale's, and Delray Beach, all that fun stuff. Then you go a little further in, and it gets a little less bright, and that's where all the sprawl is, right? All the things that are the suburbs, and all the people are working in the towns but don't want to live in the towns. And then there's these areas that are just dark, giant areas. And one's the Everglades. Then you got on the right, you got the Ocala National Forest, which is the largest national forest in America. And then the other side, you've got Withlacoochee State Forest, and then you've got the Green Swamp, that's a proper name for it, right? And that's where all of Florida's water comes from. So as it trickles down to Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades again, which used to be a river of grass, and now it's a bunch of roads, so that's why our ecology is all screwed up down there. But anyway, so the wildlife corridors are weird. So the ones down near the Everglades tend to be more lanky and orangutan looking, and more like light brown color. Dave Shealy probably has one of the best footages of it on YouTube that nobody knows, right? It's one of those. Everybody knows the Patterson-Gimlin film from California. The Patty, the famous Bigfoot. Dave got footage in the early 2000s on video. It is crystal clear. It is not shaky cam. He films it for several minutes. It's running through a swamp. So if it's a dude in a suit, he's running through a swamp in a fur suit filled with alligators and snakes and everything else that wants to eat you down there. And it's hot. So and he doesn't stumble. He doesn't do anything. It's like it's made for it. It knows what it's doing. It's impressive footage. He runs the Skunk Ape headquarters down there in Florida. He actually moved to Everglades City and opened the Skunk Ape headquarters because of his experience there. And that's a great place to visit. If nothing else, it has the second largest python in the world, named Goldie. And I think she's actually the largest, but every time the Guinness or Ripley's comes to measure her, she gets shy. So, that's how it goes. Am I right, guys? Anyway, sorry, it's a little late. All right. But anyway, so then you go a little north. The ones in the Ocala National Forest are a little more aggressive, and they seem to be more like the classic Sasquatch, right? Big, scary-looking brown guys, and famously, one group of them attacked a Boy Scout troop there, where the police got involved to investigate this bear attack that they thought might have been Bigfoot. So they didn't say skunk ape, thankfully. I don't really like that term, but it's funny, so can't go wrong with that. But then the ones in the green swamp also tend to be more along those lines. But the ones in Myakka, which is the current Myakka State Forest and Withlacoochee State Forest, are the two current hotspots. Everybody thinks Pacific Northwest. There are more sightings in those two areas right now than anywhere else in the United States. I think you got to go still back to the Himalayas to get even more sightings. Stacy Brown of Finding Bigfoot and Outcast Paranormal are actually out there this weekend. They emailed me the other day, because I'm the creepy Florida guy. And it's, Mark, we've got footprints, we got fresh prints. And I'm like, of Bel Air? No. Anyway. Thank you. I'll be here all night. Enjoy the meal. All right. Anyway, they actually found some tracks. They were looking for something else and discovered that. So it's kind of interesting that the Bigfoot team suddenly finds Bigfoot prints. So there we go. So that's the areas that you want to look for if you're going to go skunk ape hunting. There are lots of places that will offer to help and take you to some of these historical sites. Again, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to take you, refer you to teams and stuff. Probably the most famous encounter with one is another historical encounter. I love going to the history ones, right? So, 1818, another wonderful town in Florida with a great name, Ocheesee. The Ocheesee Pond. They had a settlement in 1818, and they noticed their food stocks were getting raided. Their livestock was going missing. Usually that's results in a story, don't go into the swamp, right? Don't do this. So they set up a posse to figure out who was robbing them. And they go out with muskets and guns and all this fun stuff. And as they get out there, they find a wild man. He's a giant wild man. And so the wild man, they say, okay, time to, we gotta do something about this. So they take it into town, they capture it. They have captured an 8-foot furry man. Bring him in to their town, and they don't know what to do with it. They shot it, it's injured. The great illustrations from the newspaper of it are these two little tiny guys this tall, and they're thing like that in a cage above them. So they say, let's send it to the governor. He'll know what to do in Tallahassee. They put it on a cage behind a stagecoach, and I can only picture like a U-Haul with this giant King Kong gorilla on the back. And they wheeled it to Tallahassee, which isn't too far from there. The governor signs for it and says, what the hell do we do with this? He sends it to the Florida Home for the Insane. We have records of it being admitted as basically a John Doe, just an X. And then we have the order for it to be shaved. And then 3 days later, we have its death certificate. It was buried in the pauper's grave there. So we were excited to hopefully get permission to investigate the pauper's grave. Well, we found out we got permission to investigate Pauper's Grave 2, which was all the ones buried after 1900. Well, where's Pauper's Grave 1? Nobody had records. We finally figured it out. It's now where the Florida State Hospital stands. Oh. They built right on top of it.
Oh.
Florida does that a lot. So hopefully someday when that gets blown down by a hurricane, we can dig. So, all right, are we ready to go to the darkest timeline, the darkest Florida story? I mean, I can go UFOs, I can go whatever, but we want dark, right? All right, warning now may trigger things, so just telling you now, okay? This is probably, all right, so we got two that we could do, but this one's probably the worst of the worst. And if I say the word, and those of you who know this story will go, ooh. If you don't know the word, you're going to be like, what? Okay. So this is near the town of Mariana. It's again up in the Panhandle. Not too far from here, about 4 hours, maybe, maybe 5. And the word is Dozier. Ooh, see, I heard a few. Who's an Oz. This was the Dozier School for Boys, also known as the Florida School for Boys. Already everybody's like, ooh. Yeah, so it was Florida's home for the worst of the worst child offenders. It was built in 1901, and it was going to house 100 of the worst kids in the planet. So if they murdered other kids, if they did child rape on other kids, they were sent to Dozier, which was the Florida School for Boys initially. Within 5 years, it had over 500 kids sent there, and the facilities had not expanded. So kids were locked in there with other child murderers in facilities for nothing. So immediately, allegations of abuse and terribleness, it's just goes on. It's horrible. So what do we do about it, right? The state comes and investigates, nothing happens. They throw some money at it, they expand the facilities. 1,000 students by 1911. And more are being sent there all the time. It's a place to get rid of the problem children. And they just go there, and they don't come back a lot. Sometimes they're let out, but most of the time, they're never seen again. The records there are spotty at best. And there was a boot hill for the kids who died there. Guess how long it was open? 2011. 110 years this school was open. By the early 1940s, it had over 5,000. The facilities had not been reportedly expanded. By the 1970s, it was investigated by several state senators because the cries of abuse had grown from just the kids to staff to kids, of course. The boot hill grew. And finally, when it was shut down in 2011, we were allowed to investigate and study it. And we'd heard all these ghost stories. So of course we went for the ghost stories, right? All these disappearing kids and all this, these dead kids. But we also went because there was the boot hill. There were 24 reported deaths at Dozier over the years. There were 31 graves. Who were the other 7, right? Well, we get there, and Professor Kimmerly from USF starts doing ground-penetrating radar. They found 55 bodies in Boot Hill. Only 24 recorded deaths. So what's going on? So we do more and more research, and it just keeps getting worse. The students who survived form an organization called the White House Boys, and that's where so if you go to whitehouseboys.org, that is they're still fighting legal battles and stuff, but you can go and listen. That's also where they do their therapy, where they air their grievances and talk about the things that happened to them. So if you ever want to be depressed, You know, and also if you ever want to, scare your kids, don't be bad. We'll send you to Dozier. But kids were sent there. We started looking at the records, and they're crazy. Kids were sent there for truancy. It's supposed to be the worst of the worst, right? Truancy. Smoking, 1953. Another kid, 1961, sent there for incorrigibleness. I'd have been locked up. Oh my God. And but whenever the press would come, they'd put on these big shows. They had a zoo. They had boating and boxing and all this. It's just terrible. So we went there for the ghosts, but like I said, we found the real story was so much worse. And it's still being investigated. But they're bulldozing it. They built this over the Boot Hill. They built a brand new sheriff's facility where the old school house where the fire was, or we know about 6 of the deaths came from, that is being rebuilt into an adult education center for autistic people to get them reintegrated into society, help them get jobs. So it's being turned for some good as well, but the state of Florida just wants it gone. They want to pretend like it never happened. They did one building there. It's called the White House. And it was built in the 1960s, and it was the solitary confinement. It was going to be, it's a 20 by 20 block house with 2 10-foot cells in the middle of it. And they put giant industrial fans on it. Now, there's no air conditioning anywhere else in these schools. Why did they put these big industrial fans on the 1-2-room building? And the kids who survived it said that was because that was how they hid the noise when this is the room where they took the kids to be beat and to be punished. And one of the guards supposedly had a whip called Black Beauty that was 10 feet long, and you would hear it tap on the back of the wall, tap on the ceiling, and then crack as it came down on your back. And you would only know how many times you'd been beat if the kid in the cell next to you counted. So you'd wake up the next morning and have to go back to your cell and not allowed to cry, or you would be kept in there another night. So terrible stuff, right? So we went for ghosts. Of course there's paranormal stuff there. Of course there's that, but the history is so much worse. So on that happy note, let's do one more. But this one's kind of crazy. Okay, this one starts dark but then gets fun. You ready? Okay. So Port St. Lucie. Anybody know that area? Oh yeah, right? Little north of Delray Beach. And Boca Raton and all that. I love Delray Beach. It has a connection to Jack the Ripper. There was a pub called the Blue Anchor Inn in Delray Beach that got taken down brick by brick, and it was brought back to America, and it was where Jack the Ripper's victims were last seen. So it was actually in London, and now it's here. Okay, lastly, so there's a guy with 3 names in this story, right? So if a guy has 3 names in a historical story in Florida, exactly, right? Gerard John Schaefer. Anybody know this guy? He was a sheriff's deputy in Broward County, and he liked to do twofers, where he would kidnap hitchhikers, flash his badge, and take them to this tree next to this old destroyed house. And then he would tie them to the tree, do terrible things to them, make them determine who died next, and then he would still do terrible things to their bodies. He lost his job as a sheriff's deputy, imagine that, moved a little ways north, tried to do it again, but got caught. And down at the tree, though, the stories were going. Now, he eventually became pen pals with a guy named Ted Bundy. They found his shoebox in his mother's house with his trophies, with teeth and other trinkets from his victims. So they were able to tie him to 2. And they also found that he had fictionally confessed to 86 murders. But he posed those as a book, and it's called Killer Fiction. You can check it out from the library. And you can read a book by a serial killer. Now, Gerard got murdered by his cellmate. He was stabbed 49 times and his eyes were gouged out. So it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. But this tree, everybody kept talking about this tree. The reason he did this was the tree drove him to it. The tree is called the Devil's Tree. Florida, we got a lot of devil stuff. We got the Devil's Chair. We got Devil's Millhopper. and which is a sinkhole on top of another sinkhole. Again, we can't have nice things. We got to rename it. But the Devil's Tree, it drips black sap, and if you collect that sap and use it for your dark magics, your power will be tenfold. The tree itself grows straight into the heart of hell. And of course, they were like, we've got to stop this. So the city's like, let's cut down the tree. So they send a couple men to cut down the tree. As soon as they start chopping the tree, their chainsaws break. So they go to get new chainsaws. They get in a car accident and a head-on collision, and both men die. So the legend of the tree grows. Right? So another lady gets the idea that, oh, the reason that they died was they had bits of the tree in their chainsaws. So if I go get bits of the tree and I put it in my cheating husband's car, he's going to get in a car accident and I get away with murder. We know this story because she got in a car accident on her way out of the parking lot, not thinking ahead. So the tree legend grows, right? City poisons it. It's still there. They say, all right, that hole where the sap is dripping, that's the problem. We got to stop these freaky people with cloaks coming to our tree. And so that'll stop it. So we'll bulldoze the house that was there, the old abandoned house, and then we'll cement in the tree. So that's going to kill it. You know, it can't grow through cement. Now it has an impervious cement trunk, and it is never going to die. It has grown and grown and grown. So they get the final brilliant plan is, all right, that's it. We can't kill it. Let's make it a park. It's Florida. Oak Hammock State Park. Visit, and you can go. Now there are 2 fake Devil's Tree when you go. But most famously is if you take the second entrance along the nice channel there, you will see this little box turtle that we love. Carrie loves him. He's our favorite little guardian of the Devil's Tree. He's been there ever since we've been there 30 years. We go see him, and he will pop out, and he'll say hi, especially if we bring him lettuce. Organic only. He's picky. Okay. All right. But anyway, if you go down that little path, you'll go to the Devil's Tree, and you can see it. And then you can go a little further and see the ruins of the old house. But the big thing is remember that people died there. We don't know how many, so remember the victims. And, you know, feel free to curse George on Schaefer's name while you're there. So, but anyway, thank you all so much for coming. I have many more stories. Full books. I've been speaking at the Mothman Festival in 2 weeks, which is crazy, up in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. If you want to talk about a crazy festival, imagine all you cryptid and paranormal peeps descending on a town of 5,000 from all over the world, 50,000 people. But we have some books over here if you want to buy some. Otherwise, I'll be at the vendor hall tomorrow. When I'm not doing panels here, I got a couple more panels tomorrow. Tomorrow night at 7, we're doing cryptids around the world. So I got to bring some more fun cryptids there. But thank you all so much. Thank you. And you can find me at EerieFlorida.com. And there's a Tampa Bay TV show called Eerie Travels that I do every Friday. But it's up on YouTube now, so you can find it on there too. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of your DragonCon. Stay safe. Stay freaky.